Hi, everyone. Welcome to the World Bank Solutions for Youth Employment Work in Progress conversation series, where we share bite sized insights on the evolving landscape of youth employment globally. Through the series, we'll be interviewing private sector leaders from companies across various industries. Today, joining us is Johan Reiman, Director Corporate Social Responsibility from the Volvo Group. Johan, really excited to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Really nice to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you, Yuan. Let's dive, deep. As a leader in the transport and engineering sector, with Volvo, what are some of the biggest trends and challenges you're seeing today, especially in low and middle income countries with respect to skills and sustainability?
What we see today, especially in low income countries, we see something that has been described as a skills gap. We do have a need for skilled labor, especially when it comes into heavy duty mechanics, drivers and operators for our products. And in many of the countries, we do see that there are existing schools that will educate these young boys and girls. But the level of knowledge that the graduates have is not sort of adequate in order to get an employment, which means that there is a skills gap that we need from the industry to bridge once we have employed them. And that is, I would say, quite a big challenge, which we are trying to mitigate and which I believe that we will come into a bit later. And when it comes from a more global perspective, we do see that in many places of the world, we need to strengthen and also inspire more youth into the STEM area, especially women and young women, to become engineers, and that we can only do by we as big multinational companies going out and trying to inspire the youth by showcasing what type of companies that we are and what type of roles that exist within the companies as an engineer, and taking part of different initiatives, such as the solution for youth employment, for example.
Got it. Thank you, Yuan. Could I dive a little bit deeper? You mentioned women, you mentioned, young people. Can you speak about what specific skills does, an organization such as Volvo, is working while, training young people? What are the type of training programs you all are doing? Maybe you can focus on, programs in Africa that spotlight, some of these skills gaps and challenges that you all are trying to address.
Definitely. I mean, we have been working in Africa for the past 10 years, over 10 years actually, with education of heavy duty mechanics, so mechanics for the heavy duty industry basically, and in our case, it's trucks and construction equipment, etc. And we are doing that in partnership with, for example, Swedish SIDA and USAID, and also the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO. And for us, that has been a successful recipe to actually create jobs in Africa. And we have, as of today, been able to, through our education, provide over 5,000 jobs, and over 7,000 students that have gone through our education. And our contribution to that, and if we're going to, roll back a little bit and look at, okay, what does Volvo do in this type of initiatives? So we believe that we should contribute in any type of social impact initiatives with what we are good at. Really think about, okay, what type of company are we? What is our assets? What is our resources? So in this particular case, educating young youth to become heavy duty mechanics, for example, we do provide them expertise into building a modern curricula. Again, going back to what I said in the beginning here, so we need the students, the graduates of these programs to be employable, to be at an industry level where we can employ them and take them further, not to employ them and train them to be able to take them further. They need to be well trained and knowledgeable when they leave the schools. So that is one of the things that we do. We help with curriculum development. We send down modern equipment, because that's also one of the things that we have identified, is that the equipment in these schools, they are usually outdated. So we provide then modern equipment like engines, gearboxes, complete trucks, excavators, for example. And then we focus on the teachers at the school to really bring up the level of knowledge of teachers so that they become proficient in teaching, both in when it comes to pedagogics, but also from a more content, not technical knowledge to raise that level. So we sometimes we do invite them to our training centers outside Africa, in Dubai or in Europe, for example, or we fly down our technical trainers to the schools and teach them. And we do that a number of times a year throughout the program's life cycle. So really, again, that to raise the level of knowledge for the teachers. So that's one of the things. And then that we do, then the other partners, they also, of course, contribute with their expertise. I mean, UNIDO, for example, they are our product implementation partner. So we can focus, Volvo, we can focus on providing technical expertise in our products. The product management side of the project is run by another organization who are specializing in this type of programs and implementing those. And then we have, for example, CEDA or USAID, which comes in with an huge knowledge or deep knowledge within market systems development analysis, for example, to really make sure that we do the right types of interventions in each and every project.
Okay. Thank you, Johan. That is really helpful. You know, what I was curious while you were saying is you mentioned one profession, right? You mentioned heavy duty mechanics. Can you share a little bit about, what are the trainings and the other roles that you're doing? Maybe spotlight a little bit about women, like what is the women's participation like in these countries, especially in, sectors such as engineering. So maybe a little bit of a two-part to this question. A, focus a little bit on roles, and then two, about women themselves and their participation in these trainings and afterwards in the workforce.
Right. So when it comes to other type of roles, for us, again, in Africa, we have been really focusing on mechanics, but also because that is such a key role for us to be long-term sustainable in these markets, because the mechanic is often the customer-facing part in our case, especially, if you go out on a job to a mine or on the road, so to say, they meet customers all the time. So, and also without the mechanics, without anyone to service and repair and put maintenance into our products, we can't really run our business. So it's a really a key role, and there's I would say a global shortage also of heavy duty mechanics. So it's really important to us. So that's why we have been focusing quite a lot on that role. Then we have another key ingredient in our industry, of course, is to have persons, youth, that are willing to train to become operators of our equipment. So truck drivers, bus drivers, operators of construction equipment, for example. So that is the other roles, or the other roles, so to say, that we've been focusing on in Africa. So using the same setup, the name for it is the PPDP, the Private Public Development Programs. That's the sort of the concept in which we are doing this type of initiatives. So using the same setup then as before the heavy duty mechanics, but for the operators or truck drivers or bus drivers. And you mentioned also women and female participation. In each of these projects, we have a set goal, a set target on the female participation. It's very important for us because we need more women in the transport industry. We need more women to become truck drivers, bus drivers, and everything. So we have been working quite a lot on this in the programs, and we've actually been using the World Bank Gender Innovation Lab in Ethiopia, and to great success, I would say, to help us figure out how do we reach these young women, how do we reach them, how do we convince them to become heavy duty mechanics, for example, or truck drivers. Typically male dominated field, and it's not that super easy to convince then a 19-year-old or 20-year-old woman to enter into this field. But I think we have been fairly successful, and I would say that in certain programs we are well over 20% female, which is really good. And we have been forced to think a bit outside the box and being creative in how we are sort of reaching them. It doesn't really work to use maybe the more traditional ways of communicating. We need to, I mean, now we're also thinking about going back a few years in time here when we learned these lessons. You know, we needed to use social media. We need to be there, reach them, to talk to. Sometimes it didn't work just to talk to the woman in herself, but we needed to talk to the parents and maybe also some relatives, and to break that sort of barrier. But as I said, I mean, we have been fairly successful. We can always do better, and we want to be even better. But I think we have been fairly successful.
Super. Thank you, Johan, because, it's so interesting you mentioned this, because we have another, podcast series. We call it Women in Unconventional Jobs. And this is exactly what we speak about, some of the barriers and these various programs, say in Mexico, in parts of Kenya, Ethiopia, East Asia, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. We speak about how, organizations are finding creative ways to first kind of engage the community and the families, and then embed culturally into some of their systems through, art competitions, or through movies, or through, behavioral nudges, and, maybe even WhatsApp bots through which, they're trying to like have these convince parents, send them short stories, videos, to kind of ensure they visualize their kids, and even young girls, that they can look at, role models, mentors, to kind of join and lay the pathway to joining these professions. We actually did once one case like this in Azerbaijan, where the World Bank worked with the country office and the railways of Azerbaijan to launch one of its first cohorts of young women in the railways. So what you're saying is super interesting. And about women, and hopefully, we're going to link this in the description if you can give us more information about this program.
Sure.
Another question for you, Johan, is that you must be like meeting young people day in and day out, through your career, and because by the nature of your work, working with young women, training them, young people. So can you share a little bit about what advice you have for young people, trying to enter this sector, the transportation, logistics, and engineering sector? What advice do you have for young people from Africa? What advice do you have for young people globally, especially leaders who are trying to break into, organizations such as Volvo?
That's a very good question, and thank you so much for that. Mm, Good advice. It is a bit different. When I go to Africa and visit our schools, for example, that is one of the most sort of rewarding activities that I can do, actually, to meet especially the young women that we have been sort of really trying to inspire and convince to enter to this field, into the transport industry. And when I meet them, I get really, I mean, they give me energy, actually. That's the first thing. They are usually very inspiring because they are so courageous, number one, and they are usually very intelligent and dedicated to really become an engineer or an heavy duty mechanic or a truck driver, for example. So just listen to them, and I think that gives me energy, and hopefully what I can give back is then to what I usually say is that just try to follow that dream, and not let like stereotypes and bias be a sort of a hindering or an obstacle for their future endeavors in the industry. Um, and But usually, I mean, I don't need to say that much. It's just to be there to listen and to really just give a friendly word to them, because they are usually very keen on what they want to do, and really they want to achieve. And if we look at the results from our schools and the progress that we have, I would say in 9 times out of 10, the top percent is the females. They do very well, and they are also very well received out in the industry. So that is something I try to tell them, that I mean, you are usually top of the class, and why shouldn't you be like that when you go out into the real job market? You will continue to do well, and you will continue to really kick it, so to say, when you come out in the job market. Um, so it's a little bit different when, for example, I speak to someone in Sweden, but it's basically the same. I can see the same trends. We see that girls and young women, they are outperforming actually the boys when it comes to the STEM, especially within STEM. And we try to encourage more and more women to go into the engineering field. So when I do meet with students in high school in Sweden, for example, or elsewhere in Europe, I try at least to encourage in the same way. They already, kicking it. They already top of the class usually, and just continue and believe in themselves, and because they will do enormously well, and we can also see that when we do employ young persons here, or youth right now, that the females do very well in general.
Got it. Got it. So, Yuan, what I'm hearing is you're telling young women that, just like follow the dream, keep the path, but, carry it until employment and do well and have the confidence to, translate these skills that you've amassed in education even towards employability. So thank you so much, Yuan, for your time. I think some of your insights that you shared with us and to our young people have been incredible. And hopefully we can do an entire section about, women in conventional jobs soon again. But meanwhile, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and we're happy to make another session.